big talking point this offseason is Josh Giddey's pending new contract with the Chicago Bulls and what that amount is going to be. And while the comment talked about numbers being $30 million, a writer actually predicts that Josh Giddey will re-sign for $25 million. We'll talk a little bit about that and why people are so obsessed with the number that Josh Giddey ends up signing with. Also, the Washington Wizards are reportedly circling Jalen Smith and targeting him as a trade target this offseason, which now makes all three of the Chicago Bulls centers on the trade market. We'll talk a little bit about that and what has the playoffs taught us about our Chicago Bulls. We can get into all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. I want to go to an article that comes over from Andrew Hanlon that is, built from a conversation between Jason Pat and another writer as well. And they talk about Josh Giddey's pending contract situation, right? I'm going to read the direct quote here. The harsh conditions of restricted free agency and the lack of offers that may come with it could get the Bulls to offer him something low of $20 million range, as annual salary in the $25 million range could be his ceiling and ultimately a fair compromise. Giddey will aim for $30 million for the $30 million mark. In most other offseasons, he would likely reach it based on his finish to the 2024-25 season. Unfortunately for him, but fortunately for Chicago, he may have to settle for less. Now, I did it at the beginning of the season, right? And, especially then where Josh Giddey was kind of an unproven in a Bulls uniform commodity, right? Like needing to see what and how he was going to play for this Chicago Bulls team. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that if any team, I want to be clear here, any team in the NBA can get a player for a little bit less, most teams are going to try to use that leverage to get it. And in this article, what they're pointing towards is the fact that the Brooklyn Nets are the only team really that are a threat to get the money together to sign Josh Giddey. And that's the thing that you look at it for. The Spurs are basically off the table when it comes to it. The Houston Rockets, if they opt out of Fred VanVleet's contract, could technically get enough money to offer Josh Giddey a contract, but they're looking for a go-to scorer, and I doubt that that's what they do to get there. And there's some doubt on even there. We'll find out in 2 days if they're going to opt out of Fred VanVleet's contract. So it really does leave the Brooklyn Nets as the potential team. The Utah Jazz could, but then that would mean that Jeremy Sohan opts out of his contract. That's over $20 million. He's not going to do that because he's not going to get that in the open market. So that all leads to the situation of it really comes down to the Brooklyn Nets and to Josh Giddey. And to Josh Giddey fans everywhere, they're going to say, well, why are the Bulls nickel and diming? And the thing is, every franchise, like I said, most franchises are going to do that unless you've done something as far as you've been with that team. Like if Josh Giddey was a player that was drafted by the Bulls, I don't think that we'd even be having this conversation on, well, can they get him for less, right? But most teams that acquire somebody that they have a little bit of wrinkle and opportunity, they're going to try. Now, just because they're going to try doesn't mean that they will, right? And because they have that power to match any offer that he's going to get, it gives them a place to operate and have a conversation from a standpoint of a little bit of leverage, right? But I want to be clear here. At this point, and I know, like I said, I'm calling myself out as well. At the start of the season, I was one of those guys of saying, well, do you really want to give Josh Giddey $30 million, right? But with the way that he finished, and even said it in this article, most players, with the way that they finished 24-25, would be getting their money, right? And it just comes down to the fact that he's not unrestricted, he's restricted, and the market isn't really out there, as a lot of teams are more so positioning themselves for the summer of 26. So that all leads to a situation where the Bulls could get Josh Giddey for a little bit less. But my thought process on that is, just sign him. I really hope that this doesn't turn into a thing, and not to say that it's something that I think would really sour a player on a franchise or anything. I think Josh Giddey has a pretty level head of understanding that this is a business, right? even going into it. And, he was pretty honest early on that they weren't going to get an extension done before the season, which meant that he was going to have to wait until restricted free agency. He had a pretty level head about that. I think Josh Giddey and his representation understands, just the realistic situation that they're in, right? But when it all comes down to it, like, just re-sign the kid. Like at this point, like I've seen enough from Josh Giddey and what I've learned over the season of Josh Giddey being here. Even if you take away on the court, like this is a kid that puts in a lot of work, right? And I think when you're looking from it from the outside in, like I was when he was on the Thunder, I'm not ingrained in Thunder news and everything each and every day. You hear from his teammates, that still love him over in OKC, how much this kid puts in work, right? And his role in OKC was a lot different. He came in, he had a larger role. And like I said, I'm all for if they end up giving a 3-year instead of the full 5-year deal, I understand that, right? Like that's what you get into. But I think overall, like Josh Giddey's shown himself at the minimum to be a player that works. And he shows himself at minimum, he's going to be a player that can run that point for you. And yeah, $30 million is a definite investment in a player, but if they compromise, if the Bulls come to the table with 20, Josh Giddey comes to the table with 30, they compromise at $25 million, great, right? That's negotiation. And, I know some people, especially when you're a big fan of a player, you lean towards the player. If you're a fan of just the franchise first, you lean towards the franchise. If some people are just pessimistic about signing anybody for that amount of money, it is what it is. But like I said, because the Bulls giving Josh Giddey or, signing Josh Giddey for $25-30 million, it's not putting your team in a negative cap situation. The Bulls have so much cap space and cap flexibility going forward. It puts them they're still in a really good spot to add to the team if they need to do it. It comes down to AK and Everly's and the Bulls' overall aggression and focus on improving this team. And it's much less about Josh Giddey's $30 million contract, if that's what he ends up signing for, tying the hands of the franchise. So, I know this is going to be music to some people's ears that he could settle for $25 million. He could end up getting that rather than $30 million. Okay, I mean, cool. If it's over a 5, you save yourself $15 million. That could go out there and get you a role player. That can go out there and be your extension for XYZ, whoever name player, right? So, we'll see. And I think Josh Giddey as well. And the part that I think a lot of people are overlooking this as well is that it's how they pitch this to Josh Giddey, right? If they go to the table and say, hey, Josh, we're coming to this with $22 million. I know it's less than what you want, but this is where we're going. This is the flexibility that is going to give us to add this, right? I think that's the important part of all this. It's not going to be as simple as the Bulls sit down and like, you only get $20 million. Josh Giddey sits down, I want $30 million. And then they're looking at each other, waiting for somebody to flinch. It's a negotiation, which means that you're also talking to your player to say, hey, this is why we want this amount of money, and this is what we are going to try to do with the amount of money that we could save on this deal to get us to a place where we're actually competing for something. And if you have that plan, I think that Josh Giddey is the type of player that will hear that and say, okay, all right. So, and it puts pressure on the franchise. Now, AK then has to live up to that, right? Because if you don't, that's what creates distrust between a player and the organization. If you sit down with the player and tell them, hey, listen, you want $30 million, we're going to give you $25 million, and we're going to use this money that we're saving here to go out and get you the center that you need. We're going to go out and get you the shooters that you need off the bench so you can create for them. We're going to put you in a situation to where we're going to win, trying to get out the first round of the playoffs. This is what we're doing. This is our plan. If you sit down and you actually have a plan, this is why having a plan isn't just important for the fans. It is also important for your players to know what they're buying into. If you have players that feel like they are legitimately buying into something that is going to keep moving forward, that is where you can get a player that says, all right, I wanted 25. I wanted 30. I settle for 26, right? That's where you can get that. But you have to be making those moves. And if you sell a player on that and you don't, that's when it's like, well, shit, I took a little bit less so that we can leave some space in here so we can keep Io, so we can keep Kobe and go and add XYZ, and you didn't do that. I'm out of here in 3 years. Like, and then it's fair on the side of the player as well. So, we'll see. We shall see. And I think ultimately, like, I hope that this Josh Giddey negotiation is way less pomp and circumstance than what us as pundits and and content creators are making it out to be that, restricted free agency starts within a day or so of that, we get announced that Josh Giddey's re-signed with the Chicago Bulls, and we can just move on and figure out what the hell is happening next with this team. But that's the time on that one. I want to go ahead and move on from that. Let's get into this next one. This one comes from Sports Illustrated, which take it with a grain of salt. Some of their articles, well, most of their articles are really well written. Some you can tell are written by AI. There you go on that one. But this one, this one was an article that was written by Tyrone Montgomery over on Sports Illustrated, and he mentions that the Washington Wizards are targeting Jalen Smith. Now, I don't know Tyrone Montgomery and his connection to the Washington Wizards or not. He actually wrote this on the Wizards Sports Illustrated page, so you would like to think that at some point he's a little tapped in with this franchise. And he says this: Smith would make the perfect addition to the Wizards. He's an athletic player who isn't afraid to bang down low and grab rebounds. His athletic ability makes him able to defend switches on pick and rolls. I'll get into that here in a second. He is also a player who shoots the three shot efficiently. Smith would make a perfect reserve player for the Wizards with the occasional starts throughout the year. The Wizards will see if he's available. So, all right. This now makes, and I think the more interesting part of this conversation, this now makes 3 Chicago Bulls centers. 3. We only have 3 on the roster. 3 Chicago Bulls centers that are potentially in trade talks, negotiations, targeted, or on the trade block, right? And so I really am starting this. I know this is kind of, maybe it's confirmation bias, but when we heard the rumors of Nikola Vucevic and Zach Collins are both on the trade block, now that Jalen Smith could be somebody that's being targeted by the Washington Wizards. To me, this is the Bulls hedging their bets. To me, again, this is not in the article. This is my personal opinion on this, is that it seems to me as if center is definitely what the Bulls are going to be drafting. And like I said, could be completely, I'm calling it out, right? Calling myself out. This is completely confirmation bias, right? But if the Bulls are now looking at shopping all 3 of their centers, right, and they draft a center, it doesn't mean that they're gonna move off all 3 centers. It just means that they are hedging their bets to say, all right, if we're going to draft a center, we want to create an opportunity for the center to earn minutes. We're not going to do that with 3 centers on the roster. So let's see which combination of these guys we can move. Maybe it's 2 out of the 3. Maybe it's just 1 out of the 3, depending on the move that you get back, whatever it is, right? And, especially with like a Jalen Smith who could play a little power forward, right? So because of all of that, it puts you in a situation where, to me, that's just what makes sense by the Bulls. Now, listen, if the Washington Wizards believe that Jalen Smith is a player that can switch on to multiple positions, like, okay, cool, he's a bad on-ball defender, but if you believe that and we're trying to move you, great. He can switch, but his effectiveness once the switch happens, it's like, yeah, okay, did you really switch anything? Like, same result. So, but, he is, per minute rebounding is really good. It's always been good for him. He's a player that averaged 15 minutes but got almost 6 rebounds. That's really good per minute rebounding, right? The blocks, almost a block, right, in those 15 minutes as well. And Jalen Smith has always been one of those players that you look at and you're like, what can he do with more minutes? He's only averaged over 20 minutes once in his NBA career, and that was when he got traded to the Pacers in 2021-22. He started off that season with the Suns where he averaged 13 minutes, but after he got traded to the Pacers, he averaged 24 minutes and averaged 13 and 8, right, with a block per game. So I could see why a team, if you're willing to play him more minutes, could look at a Jalen Smith acquisition and say, hey, this makes some sense. Now, what are the Wizards giving up? Of course, is the question here. Is it future draft capital? Well, that team's going rebuild. Do they want to give up draft capital for a player like Jalen Smith? Then you look at contract matching by that team, and you're like, there's nothing really here to me that I think that they would realistically give up that also makes sense for the Chicago Bulls, personally, right? So if the Wizards come calling, great. I mean, listen to every deal, see what you can get when it comes down to it. But to me, I don't see where the symmetry is, I guess, between the two franchises, but you never know how things are going to work out. So, if the Bulls and the Wizards can come up with a deal for Jalen Smith, that ends up being the center that they move, cool, right? It looks like they are, just want to look. Well, it looks like they are $31 million beneath the first tax apron. So technically, they can absorb some salary if they want to. and give a pick. Now, you're not going to get a first at all for Jalen Smith. I want to be clear there. And you look at their second-round picks, they have the Bulls' own second-round pick this year. They have 4 second-round picks in 2026. They have another 4 picks in 2027 in the second round. So maybe it's a second rounder for Jalen Smith, which in the next 2 drafts, that's pretty good, right? So maybe it is that. We'll see what happens. But if the Wizards come calling, I'm sure that the Chicago Bulls will listen to the deal. It's just, what is the offer? What do they put forward? And what are you getting? I guess we shall see. But all right, with that said, let's get to the last topic of today's episode. So if you guys don't know, I do host NBA Central, aka Sixth Man Shenanigans, which is a great name for a show. And we've been basically hosting live watch parties for a lot of the playoff games. But usually the late games is where we kind of get in at. And so I've watched basically every single playoff game, right? And one of the things that it does that watching these playoffs has reminded me, made very evident and clear, right? And I have to say, because there are some Bulls fans that I think really think, because of the way that we finished the season, that we're closer than what we are, right? And that's a dangerous place. Like, the front office fell the last 3 years before this year, they fell into that trap. And that's a bad trap for a front office to play in, right? Or to fall in. But the one thing that I've noticed throughout all of these and throughout the teams that have success in the playoffs, and I don't just mean teams that won the playoff series, but teams that have had success, meaning that they did have a chance to win the series or they won some tough games, is a few things that the Chicago Bulls are lacking, right? And that doesn't mean that they aren't on the precipice of finding these things, but it also means that they don't have them right now, right? One of the things that clearly stands out to me is coaching. Like, and again, I know that I'm not a Billy Donovan guy. I am realistic though, that I say if the Bulls start off next season like they finished this season, don't be surprised if Billy Donovan gets a contract extension. I'm just going to be 100% honest with you, right? So as we wish for Bulls success, as long as that happens while Billy Donovan's coaching, he's going to have a job here. But I do think, I look at how these teams adjust, right? Specifically, like looking at the Indiana Pacers. They are a team that adjusted in every game of that series, right? And so far in the Cleveland Cavaliers series, they came in with an amazing game plan to attack the Cleveland Cavaliers. That was a team that coaching just really stood out for the team. And even when you look at some of the teams that in the Eastern Conference, or even in the West, that didn't move on, coaching was a thing in it. J.J. Redick, rookie head coach though, but he made some very bad mistakes in that series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, it also came down to the fact that Anthony Edwards was going nuclear in that series, but it is what it is, right? The Miami Heat, a team that does have really good coaching, just didn't have the edge, right? They didn't have the necessary depth. And that's another thing. Depth, right, is what the Chicago Bulls are missing. But then when you look at some of the teams that had really good success as well and had the ability to win their series, whether they did win it or did not, it also comes down to chemistry and the way that the team fits together, right? That's another thing. Team fit. And that's why what AK has done over his time here, we haven't really found the best fit and for players in this team. Like, we've avoided that. We've always tried to force things to go together. And that's what I really don't want to see in this next phase of the Bulls. That's why in talking about bigs and switchable bigs, I'm even more harsh on players like Derek Queen, because I think how things fit together are important, right? And you cannot force a fit. Now, you can look at players that are developing and say, well, listen, as we're developing, we can help that fit along. We see a little, but you have to have some of that, right? And when you don't have that, it puts you in a situation where it's just bad, right? If you don't have fit, it's just bad, right? And so also star power, like the team like the Rockets, right? They have just about everything else. Young players, really good defense, really solid coaching, but they're missing the offensive side of it, right? You're missing that go-to scorer that you need, that when the chips are down, they put the team on their back and they can go out there and get you a bucket, right? And the Bulls are still trying to develop that. We don't necessarily have it yet, but again, that's another thing. Like, when you look at these teams and how some of these series went, even a team like the Orlando Magic that have tremendous defense but are missing you have to have balance on both sides of the ball if you really want to be a team that can be truly competitive. I'm not saying just make the playoffs. I'm saying be competitive in the playoffs. You have to have balance. You have to have two-way play, right? Doesn't mean every player on your team has to be a two-way player, but you have to be able to compete offensively and defensively if you want to be able to get to that, You have to. Teams that are too weighted on one side have a very difficult go on it unless you find the right matchup for you and you have excellent coaching that can game plan the X's and O's part of it, right? But you also need a star. You need a star, which we all know that, right? To be truly a championship contender, which I'm not even talking about that. I'm saying competitive, right? I think you have to be competitive first, and then you have to become a contender. But even to be that, right, you have to have a star. And hopefully that star is also your go-to scorer. You have to have that. And when you don't, things falter for you. So I think that's a lot of what you're kind of looking at here, man. Hopefully the Bulls can really get there. But just watching this playoff run, and while it's been one of the most exciting playoffs as far as through where we are now, through every team's played at least one game in the second round. The Timberwolves and the Warriors have only played one game. But it's been very fun playoffs to watch. And I can't wait till we're talking about the Bulls being in this and being one of those teams that's having a fun series, being competitive in a series. But I hate to say this, we aren't that close to that. Now, we should be closer to making the playoffs, right? I think especially if Kobe and Giddey and this team overall start off next season how they finished it, we are definitely closer. And we should be competing for the playoffs, right? That's still an if just because we haven't seen it yet. But being truly competitive is different. And whether it's Modest ascending, whether it's Josh Giddey taking another step, Kobe taking another step, a combination of all those guys, Io, drafting the right guy that brings that star potential, trading for him, whatever it is, right? The Bulls still need a lot before they can truly be competitive in a playoff scenario. And that's just what the playoffs so far have really told me. And we'll see how closer they can get to that with whatever they do this offseason. The goal is getting closer and closer and closer. And then by the summer of 26, since that's the summer that you've identified, AK, as your summer to be aggressive and make your move, coming out of that summer, so going into the 26-27 season, we better damn well be having a team that is at very minimum avoiding the play-in. And if not, you failed yet again at another goal, and it's time to pack your bags. That's a story for another day. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Bulls related, but that's thanks to you and lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.